Hello, ladies and gents, and welcome to what is going to be a new little series that I'm going to be producing that I've affectionately called my Office Hour series. And the Office Hour series is basically going to be a series of videos that are going to consist of slightly more professional and personal discussions outside of the direct instruction of our classroom videos. So, for example, the first video that we're going to do here is going to be essentially an interview where I walk through the most basic questions that I've gotten in all the interviews that I've ever had. And I just ask or I answer them for you and essentially just discuss them a little bit for you so that you can get to know me a little bit better. And that's for anybody who wants to get to know me, be it an employer, be it a student, be it a parent, anyone at all. Now, other videos that will come out will probably consist of things like my teaching philosophy, my own thoughts about what students can do and what parents could do to continue to foster the best health and success of their students just through high school and onward. And just any other little topics that I think are appropriate to discuss and are appropriate to bring to light as you move through high school and as we think about high school, as we kind of discuss your education and your journey throughout life and the earliest parts of life. So, what we're going to do again in this particular video is conduct an interview, is basically give me the opportunity to answer. I think I have about 25 questions here that I've taken from interviews that I've gone through, whether it's for education or, a side job, working at the gym or whatever. And I've recorded my answers for them in some kind of brief bullet point fashion, not in exact scripted detail because I want to share them with you today. And I want to just let you know a little bit more about me and give you an idea about where my background is and how it was formed and shaped. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this little discussion with me that is going to be organized very much like an interview. So, for number one, of course, most interviews begin with the question, tell us about yourself. And my first bullet point here, the first thing I usually bring up is because it's usually a teaching interview, right? Is that I've technically been teaching since my senior or even junior year of high school. I actually was a tutor for high school students and for middle and elementary school students, with mostly for chess club, but also for a little bit of literacy stuff here and there too when it came to English, right? Now, my close teacher friend at the time was creating an actual elective for chess because he was really on fire for wanting to be able to teach chess for a math elective, and he did. And he got me to be an intern for that particular class, and I was able to work directly with him in the classroom, creating and grading assessments and also helping with instruction throughout the year, which was a lot of fun. And I got to, try on my teaching shoes a little bit. I got to see behind the scenes, like what is teaching like, all this sort of stuff. He was kind enough to actually give me like a very large and impressive scholarship for students most likely to go forward with education, teaching education in the future. So from then on, I went into college. I got a job as an America Reads tutor. And I worked with elementary school kids again. And then I worked as kind of a lead tutor, the one who was able to kind of guide and facilitate the other tutors in their experience with those students as well. And then, of course, I got put into an education program where I continued to teach in classrooms at high school levels, in the more local schools and more local suburbs here, all the way to, Bath, England, where I was able to teach overseas for quite a while, for like a good semester, which was really, really fun. And then I got put into my what was it called? My student teaching for half a year in a nice rural school up here in upstate New York. And then I got my first teaching job out right outside of college. And I was actually first placed in a long-term sub position in my own high school. And then I was able to uh, get a couple different offers from some rather prestigious high schools, which I was shocked by. I was actually completely shocked that one of them was actually offering me a long-term sub position right out of high school. Because I was like, oh my God, this is like one of the best high schools in the state. And I unfortunately had to turn them down because another school, another local school, gave me a full position. So I took that one. And then I've been teaching ever since. I taught there for 3 years, and then I moved into a private school. I've been teaching at a private school since, and it's been fantastic. I've been loving teaching. It really does not feel like work to me at all. And that is the most cliche thing that you usually hear from people about their careers and all the self-help stuff. But when the pandemic was hitting and I was looking for another job, that became more and more actually like evident to me. I would actually like sit down and do this whole thing called teaching, and I would realize, wow, this actually doesn't feel like labor at all. Creating lesson plans and creating the materials that we need for class came really easy to me. Still comes very easily to me. It's really kind of just like a raw, creative energy that I seem to have, and then it's more fun just to kind of tweak it and make sure it's even more accessible to students. And then I basically realized that, and this is the second point here, which is that I really do have, and I continue to grow my love for the students that I was teaching, and also for the content that I had. I have like this kind of this dual nature, if you want, of I really do like the kids that I work with, the students that I work with. I love, just seeing them every day. They're a lot of fun usually. I think, this is a very a cliche thing that you hear teachers criticized for quite frequently, which is that, oh, they don't actually like students. A lot of teachers don't like students. They just kind of go into education because it's an easy job or whatever. And I see that. I've definitely encountered some teachers who should not be teachers, who just don't like kids. But I do like kids. I think that they're actually quite interesting. I think they're quite fun. They're certainly funny. It's never a dull moment. And I always tell my students, I think I've said it in a couple of my videos before, that there really is no such, I shouldn't say there's no such thing, but it's extremely rare. It has been extremely rare in my career to find a quote unquote bad student or bad child, a bad kid. I've taught at this point over 1,000 different students, and I've really only seen three that might have, even come close to what people would say, oh, that's a bad kid. Like that kid's going somewhere really bad. They got a lot of really dark stuff that they're working on internally. And even again, with those students, it's like I can very clearly see, where they're coming from and why they are the way they are. So I like the kids. I think they're fun. And I think that they, usually pick up that intuition from me as well. They kind of sense that I enjoy being around them. I think they're fun to mess around with, to play with, and to teach and to kind of engage with in a lot of very deep and meaningful subject matter. And then, of course, that's the other love, is that the content. I just love the content of the humanities overall. I love stories. I really, really enjoy the stories that I get to teach. And I really enjoy the opportunity to discuss the depth of meaning that we have in them, and the abilities, and the possibility of actually integrating what we learn from those stories into our real lives and helping us see reality all around us for what it truly is and its true value and the true meaning that's kind of underneath it all, or just behind it all, that a lot of people I think are struggling to find and people want to find. So then for the third point here, my experience has mostly consisted of working with ninth graders. That seems to be like where I think maybe 60-ish or more percent of my teaching tends to land me. My student teaching was ninth grade and 12th grade, and from then on, I just kept getting put in ninth grade essentially. It's a cliche. It's like, oh, it's the first year English teacher. You got to put him with the ninth graders, and oh, he's got the freshmen, this kind of thing, right? Well, I found out, that I actually did very well with freshmen. I actually like freshmen quite a bit. They're at a wonderful kind of transition stage where they're not, jaded, by their longing to kind of get out of high school, and they're also not as like crazy and bubbly as they begin to be in middle school. So there's a really interesting kind of middle point that we find them in ninth grade. That being said, of course, they are usually a little bit timid. There's a little bit of timidity. There's a little bit of fear that they have coming into high school because depending on how the school is set up, it might be like, oh my God, like I'm now around like these huge kids, these huge seniors that I'm not used to being around, right? So I kind of enjoyed that, and it tends to be also stressful for not just them but the parents too, because there's this idea that as soon as you get into high school, and it's accurate to a degree that, oh my gosh, like, now we have 4 years to graduate and to get a good job or get into a trade school or get to college. And our grades really start to matter now. And it's like, the stress just kind of bubbles up. I enjoyed being able to be the English teacher that helps them transition into that. Because I found that whether it's from my parents or the nature that my parents kind of imbued to me, being two really successful salespeople, I enjoy being able to kind of comfort parents and show kids the path forward and kind of sell them on the idea that I think is true, by the way, which is that they're going to be okay. Things are going to be okay if you kind of stick with me and navigate this. It's going to be quite easy. Or I shouldn't say quite easy. It can be quite smooth. All right, it can be successful overall. So that's really where most of my experience has been, particularly with helping people close the gap, close literacy gaps, as I usually say, between eighth grade and ninth grade. So you enter into high school and your workload increases and the skills that you are required to demonstrate increase in their intensity and then in their depth. And I usually found in the first districts that I was working in that students had pretty severe literacy gaps where they were, 3 grades sometimes behind the reading level or the writing level that they should have been. And I was specifically tasked in my first professional job to actually run a seminar that was meant to close that gap. And I think I did that rather well. And I found actually like a lot of very useful techniques and ways in which to do that. And I just kept using that skill as I moved forward, whether it be in an actual English class or in an elective. And it's been successful ever since. I usually brag a little bit that in that particular district, which was really struggling with its literacy, my ninth graders among the four other ninth grade classes were always getting the highest marks because we were able to really I drilled them really quite aggressively into getting the skills that they needed, while also not working them to death. And they became really, really much stronger readers and writers as a result. So yeah, now the fourth point is, yeah, just about myself that and I'll discuss this a lot more in my video that I'm going to do on my teaching philosophy, but I hold a very heavy responsibility on myself to do a good job and to teach students things that are meaningful and teach them things that are good and help them be essentially better people in the world. I really don't see my job as just kind of like an easy, out that I get, the summers off with and all this kind of stuff. That's just a perk to me. And of course, as if I honestly had it my way, I would be able to teach all the way through the year. That would be way more interesting to me. I don't usually like having more than a week off. I'm like, all right, give me something to do. Come on. So I hold a lot of responsibility on myself, over myself with what I do with students. I don't take it lightly. I try to be a good teacher, pretty regularly, as much as possible. And I'm always trying to improve. That was one thing that I really learned from my first experience with student teaching was that I need to keep improving. I need to keep getting better, in a reasonable, pace and in a reasonable degree. So I'm always open to growth. I'm always open to some criticism. I'm always open to like, let's tweak this for the next lesson. Let's tweak that, immediately right now. Let's implement that change and that improvement as soon as possible and try to be the best that we could be every day. And aside from that, other values that I have are on the literacy trinity, as I call it. I really focus on how to improve students' comprehension, the trinity, as I discuss it, the trinity of literacy, which is comprehension, um, articulation, and critical thinking, or just kind of thinking in general. So those are the three things that I usually focus on in my class. And I think that are universal skills, not just for, high school English class, but I think for life overall, for having a more effective, more meaningful life overall. If you can comprehend what you are observing in the world, that's going to help you out pretty dramatically. If you can then actually think about and assess and connect what you're observing and what you're comprehending with everything else that's happening around you, everything else that you remember, everything else that you find meaningful, that's also going to enrich and strengthen your capacity in life. And then if you're finally able to actually articulate yourself, if you're able to articulate your thoughts, your problems, your ideas, and these things that you comprehend, that of course is an incredibly powerful tool that a human being can wield, not just for a professional, for professional reasons, but for personal reasons as well. So those are the things that I really try to impart to my students, for my own, for my own beliefs. Now, I also, focus on the what I call the three ideals, and again, I'll go into that in way more depth in a separate video. But the three ideals that I like to focus on in my English classes in particular are the ideals of Socrates, right? The ideals of beauty, of goodness, and truth, right? I focus on beauty, things that are meaningful, things that are enriching and kind of, bring more joy to our lives, more delight to our lives. I think everyone needs that so profoundly, to help, see the beauty and the glory of life. And I also focus on goodness. I focus on pretty clear, direct character education at times and trying to demonstrate to my students, like, look, this is what goodness looks like. This is what evil looks like. This is what we don't want to do. And of course, there's all the nuances in between, right? We're not absolutists, right? In my classroom, it's more like let's get some obvious, groundwork as to what is bad, what is good, and then where we can tease out all the more complexities in between. But goodness and behaving good and trying to be good, capital G, right, is a very strong part of my education. Now, the last one, of course, is truth, right? The idea of gaining more and more wisdom, the idea of gaining more knowledge and more deep understanding about things and about people and about life in reality is, of course, one of those as well. So all three of those I try to really, weave into every piece of education that I engage in. So that's number one. Tell us about yourself. Now, in a true interview, of course, I would shorten that down quite a bit, but there's the gist of it. Now, number two, why are you interested in this position, in this career? Now, so again, for depending on whatever school I was applying to or whatever job I was applying to, they're always going to ask, why are you interested in this? Why you want to pick our district? And of course, we want to look at the district's mission statements. You want to look at their demographics. You want to look at their, success rates, all this kind of stuff. You want to get a feel for their culture, yada, yada. But I usually, like for a question like this, I will focus more on the career aspect, like why this position? Why do you want to be an English teacher? And I've had students ask me that directly. Like every year, I got some kid who'll just throw that as a curveball randomly when I'm walking across the room. It's like, why did you choose to be a teacher? Why did you choose to be an English teacher? And again, I gave you like four reasons here. Number one is again the deep love for the content, for its wisdom, its delight, and its applicability. So I have loved stories since I can remember. I have like a very, very far back memory when I was like 3 years old. Even back then, I was obsessed with stories. I loved Disney stories. I loved Disney movies. I loved engaging with them, watching them again and again and again and again, and trying to get something out of them, and trying to understand them or experience them in a new way. And that never stopped. Whether it was Disney, whether it was Star Wars, Pirates of the Caribbean, whatever series it was at the time, I kept absorbing stories more and more and learning about them and finding, as I said there, wisdom, delight, and some direct applicability to them. And I found that life, to be pretty profound about it, I found that life could, in fact, actually be more enriching, more beautiful, and more worthwhile if you actually try to live out your life in the way that we see, for example, traditional hero narratives being lived out. If you try to face your innermost challenges, your innermost struggles, that actually makes life way, way more intense and also more worth living, I feel like, more happy to a fundamental degree. It's hard, right? It's very, very difficult. It's really frustratingly annoying at times, but my gosh, is it more meaningful than, maybe living your life otherwise? So I found that to be so interesting, and I just I cannot still to this day shake my love for stories, and for just artwork in general. So that's one major reason. I'm like, wait a minute, there's actually a career where I can go and study those things and help others understand them too. I'm like, sign me up. Now, of course, number two is again the deep love for the students and for their growth and development, right? I'm not just, a complete English nerd, sipping tea in my, book room in Starbucks, but I actually really do enjoy engaging with students. I find the experience that they bring, I find watching them grow and overcome the challenges that they are trying to overcome, and morph and grow into unique individuals to be so fulfilling and so beautiful to watch. It's cliche, but I don't know how else to phrase it other than I actually do love my students very much. I love kids. I love people in general. I think it's beautiful to watch people create their own stories. And that's kind of the link there, right? Of course, which is that, and of course, if you were in psychology, if you're a counselor, you might understand this sentiment, which is that if you really can look at every human being as if they are a novel fundamentally, as if they are like, the main character of some like Dostoevsky novel, it's like that kind of helps you see not only that that's actually true, but that actually makes them way more interesting. Even the most like dull person or boring person you could think of in your life, if you actually can do your job, right, and really take the blinders off of your own crusted eyes with prejudice and all this kind of stuff, and see what a human being is at that deepest level. That's so entertaining and so interesting to watch, and fulfilling, I think, actually. So I try to see my students like that, and I kind of innately had that love for them. So that's one thing also, is that I get a job where I get to interact with people to that degree, and that's incredibly fun and interesting. And then yeah, the third point here is I have a deep love for learning, obviously. I to this day, this morning even, like I always throw on a podcast or an actual recording of some college course, right? I'm always like just listening. It's like, all right, give me some more things, give me some more things to learn, or to study or to kind of go through so that I can keep growing, right? I don't have this image of life where it's like, okay, I got out of high school, I got out of college, I got my job, I'm secure. Okay, I can just, kick back and relax and then, just enjoy the pay flow. It's like, no, I kind of want to keep going. I want to keep growing, because I have, again, an innate kind of thirst for more knowledge, more wisdom. I find that very fulfilling when you're able to see more of the meaning in the tapestry that is life and then artwork all around us. I think that just makes life so much more interesting. And I'm very hungry for that, almost impatiently so. And then the fourth one here, rather, is that again, this job where I get up at 5 in the morning, I get to school at 7:30, 8 o'clock, and I'm out of there by 3:30. And I'm working with students, I'm doing all this kind of stuff. That doesn't feel like a job to me. That doesn't feel like work. I'm very happy to do it to the best of my ability. I want to do it to the best of my ability. But the only time it ever really feels like work is like at that final week of the year when I'm sitting down and I got to grade a bunch of final exams back to back to back. That's a little bit challenging, but that's it. And when students are having bad days and all this other kind of stuff, I really do try to sit back, especially this year. I think I've done a good job with that. And sit back and say, well, this is one kid having a bad day out of like 100 students that I have this year that all are having pretty good days and they're all are doing rather well. So I think in my experience, or from my experience, which has been over 10 years of teaching right now, I can honestly say I just look back on it and I think I'm like, that doesn't feel like overly laborious, dull, dreary, kind of like soul-crushing work. It's actually very fulfilling to me, to the point where it doesn't feel like work when you tell me, oh, you're going to be able to teach a class about fantasy. You're going to be able to teach a class about Play-Doh. You're going to be able to teach a class about, the Odyssey. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. That's my job today. Monday, I got to get up and I got to teach a class on John Milton. Awesome. Let's go. So I get up with no sense of drag in the morning because of that. It really is just constantly interesting and fulfilling to me. So yeah, that's why I chose to be an English teacher. Now, number three, how has your experience prepared you? Well, again, kind of 4 points here. So, first of all, virtually every range of skill and background in high school, I have taught basically every skill level of students. So, I don't just focus on, like I said, ninth graders. I don't try to pigeonhole myself and only work with AP and honor students. I got them all, right? If you're a Harry Potter fan, I am like Hufflepuff to the extreme. I take all students, right? So, I initially began my career with students who were extremely low in their literacy skills coming into ninth grade. I had classes that were, a multiple integrated co-teachers because the vast majority of kids in the class had pretty severe, learning needs and IEPs and all this kind of stuff. And I went from there to teaching just normative, regions prep classes to honors classes to AP classes and even IB classes in a couple of instances. So I've got everyone basically, and if you want to count, when in college, when I taught a freshman seminar in college as well, I've even taught college level classes as too. So I've taught students who, just are obscenely brilliant and they just get things, way, way quicker than anybody else that you'll see in the room. And I've had kids that I have students that need a lot of support, need a lot of help with, closing the gap between their understanding and the work. And I've been successful with all of them. I've enjoyed all of them. That's the other thing, people ask usually is like, which do you prefer? Where do you want to be? Which classes? I fluctuate, there are years that I prefer the ninth graders. I'm like, give me ninth graders because it's fun, it's fulfilling, they're engaged, they're sincere, they're learning. Give me a kid, I'll have some years where I'm like, oh, give me some honors kids so I can, get into the depth of the story a little bit more, a little more easily, shall we say? Because I always, and something else that I might mention later, is that I pretty much always will expose my students who have those lower skills, kind of the skills that need to be developed a little bit more. I will still expose them to a lot of very complex ideas. There is no, soft bigotry of low expectations in my room, right? Everyone's going to be exposed to the same ideas because I think that that's just um, essentially their right. They should be able to be exposed to a conversation that might challenge them more, but they also might therefore find more interesting. And that is the secret, by the way, just to get off on a tangent. That is a secret that I've found um, from teaching those students is that if you actually give them material that is more heavy or more meaningful or more complex, but also meaningful, they actually engage with it quite readily and quite intensely. That was the controversy a little bit with my first humanities course that I taught, which were for those students who were, really in need of some support. I made sure everything that they read, everything that they, discussed were classics, whether it be the Odyssey, whether it be ancient Roman literature, whether it be, religious texts from, Old Testament, New Testament, the Quran, everything, to Beowulf, to some Shakespeare passages. But I picked like the stuff that was the most, dramatic or the most intense and the most morally, interesting. And they lapped it up. And they were like, this is really intense. This is really interesting. And yeah, they struggled with the comprehension, but they really wanted to because they were like, wait a minute, this is actually pretty cool. This isn't like some random story that I have to like really stretch my interest with. It's like, no, this is about a dude, in ancient Greece who's struggling with these profound things. This is about God. This is about all these other big things. So I think I've found a really good pace at which I can um, deal with students and help students at any level, no matter where they are. Because I have the proficiency, I have the comprehension level, and also the skills to deal with kids that are in that AP honors level, but also students who really struggle with their most basic comprehension and writing skills. So yeah, what else has informed me or has prepared me with my experience? The second point, 8+ years of innovating and continuing growth, teaching practices, and student and personal needs. Yeah, so I just again have had over 8 years, probably almost like 10 years of experience at this point, dealing with students with all range of needs. Again, with students with the most intense IEPs that you have ever seen, right? There's the litany of accommodations and struggles and all this kind of stuff to students who, could take the SATs and get like, perfect scores, not even trying. I've had the whole range. And I've been able to work with some fantastic supporting teachers as well. And I've been able to work with a lot of, really wonderful counselors and people that are able to give me more and more insight, more and more ideas that I'm happy to implement, right? I'm not anywhere under this delusion that I'm like, I've cracked the teaching code. I don't need anyone else's help. It's like, no, I again, as my coworkers would probably tell you, I constantly come and ask like, hey, what do you think about this idea? What do you think about this idea? What am I missing here? What do you think I should try here? Sometimes I might already have the answer, but I still want to ask, I still want to check, so I can keep kind of, answering student needs to the best of my ability. So 8+ years of experience doing that has given me a really nice toolbox, a nice breadth of experience that I can draw on. Now, for number three, yeah, my own interdisciplinary content. So, um, I was blessed in some degree with my college education and with the courses that I chose because I initially wanted to be a professor of philosophy. And I quickly learned that that probably was not going to be as engaging as I wanted it to be. So I originally had a track record because I went to a liberal arts school. I went to Hobart William Smith Colleges, as the pin demonstrates here. Um, and I took a bunch of courses in philosophy, but while I was doing that, I was also taking courses almost as kind of like a backup in religious studies, in history, and in English literature. Until in my second year, I think in my third semester, I finally decided, like let's shift gears. I don't want to do this philosophy thing anymore. I want to go into English literature. I want to be teaching English. And I shifted then to prepare myself for the education program at my college. But I was still taking any course in the humanities that interests me. So what I ended up having was this, this transcript and this background of almost every subject in the humanities where I was able to kind of splice them all together and overlap them pretty easily so that I can bring to my classroom a wealth of, information or a wealth of connections between different subjects that can actually, I think, help students quite a bit because if they're not interested in literature that much, they might be way more interested in like philosophy. I've had some, it's more of a minority of students, but they are there. Some might be more interested in history, some might be more interested in religion, some might be more interested in art. So I try to essentially layer my education, no matter what class it is, with all of the humanities in that sense, and psychology too, by the way. I forgot to mention that one, of course. And that usually helps draw in a lot more students and get them to kind of see things through a whole litany of lenses that essentially is the humanities, right? It is a multifractal jewel, or multifaceted jewel, I should say, that they can see a lot of different beautiful things and meaningful things in. And I luckily, again, had that education, but I keep learning, I keep taking courses, I keep reading, I keep trying to learn those things and see where I can bring in more of that content knowledge. So I think that that's been a very invaluable tool for me and my experience with my students thus far. And then the fourth one here, yeah, just basic tutoring and closing literacy gaps, right? So I've been tutoring for quite a while, so I don't just have the skills of having just a basic classroom management and kind of conveying the information to my students, but I also began my skills as a one-on-one tutor. So if when I do, of course, need to sit down one-on-one with my students, which I try to do, by the way, every time we write an essay, I usually will take a day and say like, okay, let's come in conference with me one-on-one. And I use those skills essentially to be like, all right, what can we do to improve this gap? What can we do to kind of, strengthen your skills here, et cetera, either in the classroom, after school, or wherever need be. So I think that all those experiences have put me in a fantastic position to be a very effective and useful teacher for these kids. So number four, how would you manage a classroom? So speaking of classroom management, right? How do I manage my classroom overall? Basically, basic words here: consistency and clear expectations, right? And routines, right? So that's basically the same terms, basically the same idea. My classrooms run on a very consistent, a very expected and understandable routine, right? You come in, there's a warm up on the board, there's some materials that you need to pick up on you when you come in, you grab that, you sit down, you do the warm up, you know what the directions are. I've explained that before, the routine has been established. And then we go over as a classroom. You know what I expect you to do as behavior in terms of your behavior and your interaction with me, everybody else. Then we go through some, direct instruction. We give you some work to go do as a group or as, with a partner or individually, depending on the classroom, the particular classroom's dynamic. And then we go over it as a class. We have a formative or a summative assessment at the end. And then that's it, essentially. And then we move on into our next project or into our next day. But the students come in knowing, like, okay, this is what Mr. G is going to expect of me. And I'm happy to say that virtually I've been teaching at my current school for about, yeah, 5+ years now. And I've had some really lovely push-in teachers or even co-teachers at times that all unprompted have been ridiculously flattering and kind. But one of the things that they keep saying to me, specifically referencing the students that they are, kind of keeping an eye on, the kids that need a little more support, they always complimented me by saying that my classroom expectations were very clear and that it was very consistent, right? I don't ever let things slide. I make sure that the consistency is pretty constant, and I usually try to be very formal and very rigorous with those expectations, so that the kids know exactly where they stand with me and they know exactly what's going to happen. There's no kind of chaos from me. I'm a very, very strict teacher in that sense. That being said, I also, put in parentheses very importantly here, flexibility too. There is flexibility in my classroom management where if someone has a problem, if something goes wrong, if the craziness of the day, I am flexible to that. That was my very first lesson when I had my first teaching placement. My placement teacher told me, got to be flexible. And I'm like, you got it, right? I'm flexible. I'm not going to, go off and start sweating if one of my, plans doesn't go well. I'm able to, be flexible to the level of my instruction and to the level of the whole plan for the day, where it's like, okay, we're behind today, we got to actually do this, let's turn around and do this instead. Hey, these kids are having a really tough day, we need to kind of tweak this a little bit, whatever it may be. Hey, my computer, exploded today, I got to deal with that. Yeah, I'm happy to be flexible with all that kind of stuff, and I'm usually very relaxed in that sense. So I don't know if I put this in here, but one of the things that I really tried to do as an educator is I tried to um, basically conduct myself with a level of calm and a level of, you could say, authority and respect that the students kind of innately pick up on. And I'm a big believer or a big practitioner and believer in the sense, in the idea that I need to be calm and relaxed. And that essentially will emanate throughout the classroom. Where if I'm into the sense where if I'm tense, if I'm kind of, anxious and all this sort of stuff, the students will be as well, and then they kind of will have trouble learning in an environment like that. So I try to remain generally calm, energetic, but calm, and confident, and not cause them too much anxiety at all. That would be needless, right? So that's generally how I structure and manage my classroom. Now, also here, this second point, yeah, I try to establish a culture of maturity. That's huge with me, right? That's one of my classroom expectations. It's right there on the board. You got to be mature. You got to be sophisticated with what you're doing. I expect you to be acting in a mature way. I expect you to be rigorous. I expect you to kind of meet me where I am asking you to meet me with the rigor of the classroom, of the work, right? I'm going to be there to help you. I'm going to be there to kind of lift you up and bring you where you need to go. But, I want to see you trying to engage with that. Excuse me. Communication is huge with me, of course. I try to communicate very effectively, very clearly, and consistently with my students. And I try to be warm too. I try not to be stressful with them. I try not to kind of, speak and teach in this tone of like, the world's going to end tomorrow, all this kind of stuff. It's like, no, I try to be very inviting and warm to where if you have a problem, if you have struggles, or if you're really, struggling to kind of get up and meet the rigor that we're asking you to do, cool, come and tell me, and let's work on it. Let's try to meet it together, and I can do my job and help you get up to that level. Okay. So that's generally how I manage my room. Now, number five, how would you deal with defiance, right? So of course, yeah, it sounds all good. What do you do when, the students are misbehaving or acting in a defiant way or not following your procedures, et cetera, et cetera? Well, a couple points here. So a lot of disciplinary issues, in my opinion, can be solved before they happen. Basically, the work needs to be done before any of this stuff goes wrong in the whole setup of the classroom, in your own demeanor, in your own character, and the way that you interact with students overall. So I try to establish a generally kind of respectful and professional relationship with my students, not overly warm, I shouldn't say that, not overly kind of goofy and friendly, right? Of course, the statement is always reiterated, we're not your friends, we are your teachers, right? We can be friendly, we can be kind, we can be warm, we can be very nurturing, but we are your teachers, right? We are here to challenge you, we are here to instruct you, we are here to guide you and to stop you if you are disrupting or being defiant in some way, shape, or form. So I try to understand each of them as much as possible, in our, crazy hectic day. I try to look at all the information I'm given about them pretty much in depth. I try to ask their former teachers about them just so I can get an idea of like where they're coming from, what they enjoy, what they don't enjoy, what struggles they've had, what successes they've had, etc., and try to connect with them with regard to those things. And also having a routine, right? I think, again, the routine really is undersold here, but a lot of my students will never struggle with any defiance or any kind of behavioral issues because they know the routine. They're like, okay, this is what is expected. If they kind of veer outside that path, I simply kind of, redirect them quite gently. And it's like, all right, come on in, make sure you do this, remember to do this, or just kind of like calmly redirect them or do it in a very gentle way where you can engage with them but not have to call them out and all this sort of stuff, right? So behavioral management in place. Expect my consistency. So what do I mean by this? Behavioral management in place. So there will already be quote unquote in place a plan of what my management is. So I tell my students, hey, I'm going to officially redirect you one time. If you do something wrong, if you do something that I don't like, or if you're kind of off task, I'm gonna redirect you one time. If you do it again, or if it continues, I'm going to probably do something to the effect of like, hey, why don't you go work on your own, or why don't you shift seats? Why don't we kind of reorient where you are in the room, that kind of stuff. If it continues, then I'm going to ask you to leave, right? And then you're going to come in and we're going to have a discussion about what went wrong and what I want to see moving forward. And that's as consistent as I am every single time. Happy to say that that basically only happens where I get to that third option. That happens maybe once a year at this point, at most. Okay, at most. So, and most of those students usually will actually come in because, again, of that relationship we've developed, because of their own good character. They'll usually come in and ask, or just apologize to me and say, like, I want to do better next time. I apologize. Let me fix that up. And there we go. And we're moving forward. Okay. So the key point there is that I am consistent with that. I am not just kind of like, throwing out a million, well, what's the cliche image of the parent who kind of just keeps saying, no, one more time, one more time, one more time. And it's like, no, no, no. It's one redirection, one movement, then I'm going to ask you to leave. It's really simple. And I do it very much in that tone, right? I try pretty diligently not to be angry. And that's part of the reason why I do this is that I try to keep the routines pretty, um, or keep my management pretty strict so that we don't get to a point where I'm getting hectic, I'm getting stressed, and then I snap at a child because they don't deserve that, because that's bad. That really fractures the relationship quite a bit, and it puts unneeded stress and strain on their development in the world. I don't like that. So, instead, I just simply direct them or redirect them again with a kind of simple tone, with a pretty neutral tone. That's not cold or not passive aggressive, and I asked them to come in and invite them to kind of come back to the game and be part of the classroom again. And I'm happy to say that a couple students actually have overtly said that to me and noticed that. And I say, Mr. G, you don't usually get angry very much. And it's like, oh, no, I do. And it's like, but I try to control it, right? I try to control it for your guys' sake and for the sake of what we're trying to do here. So that's been extremely effective so far. And I've been happy to say that most people who are in my classrooms usually compliment me on that, which is always very flattering, but also pretty affirming as well. So yeah, other little tricks, of course, other little skills. I use proximity, right? So I make sure that I'm in the vicinity of my students, right? That helps kind of keep them on task. I use nonverbal cues, like just a little bit of eye contact or kind of like a little wink or like a little kind of like, poke, be like, hey, make sure you're gonna go back here. And they usually play along with that because they appreciate the nonverbal interaction there. They appreciate the gentleness there. Again, redirections, de-escalation, right? Keep calm. Do not escalate things. Don't keep kind of like, trying to one up a student with who's being the most dramatic, right? And like I said before, yeah, I keep a calm presence and I try to have as much patience and thick skin also as I can, right? I've taught in a lot of districts where students will throw some pretty creative comments at me. That's why I used to love summer school because I would get some aggressive students or some students who would really have some again, yeah, creative insults. And you got to have thick skin with that, right? I can't take that personally. Of course, don't do that to other students, but to me, that's fine, but we're going to redirect you and tell you why that's not appropriate and yada yada yada. So yeah, I think all of that together has prepared me rather well to put me in a position where I can manage classrooms pretty effectively. And then of course, yeah, after class reconciliation and family support. So one thing I do try to do, I kind of was struggling with it a little bit, and I will admit to being a little bit lax with this during the height of the pandemic and lockdowns. But my typical practice is to reach out to families, every family, at least once a quarter and just kind of update them and say, hey, your son, daughter is doing really, really well. Here's what I'd like to see them continue working on. Here's where they are, et cetera, et cetera. So that the students innately know that there's a connection between home and where I am right now, between my parents and what they know and what Mr. G is doing. That usually will have some positive effect on their classroom behavior. Now, that also sets up a good, potential safety net where if we do have to have a discussion about like, hey, you're acting up in class a little bit, you're being a little defiant, a little off task, that kind of already, establishes a good relationship with the parents where they see the truth that I've tried to articulate here, which is that I do want your children to succeed. I want them to be, good men and women who lead successful, happy, and fulfilling lives. And we're struggling with that a little bit. We're struggling with the behavior in the classroom, all that kind of stuff. So that when I do reach out to the parents and I say, "Hey, I'm having a little bit of trouble here, or we're having a little bit of a tough time," the parents know that I'm not, Professor Snape as much as I look like him, just trying to, axe a student here and make their life miserable. No, I want to make this a positive experience and a growing experience for them as well. And I like to have the parents help, and I like to offer the parents help as well. So, those are all, use all four of those things together. And I think it really does establish a pretty structured and pretty successful way of dealing with any sort of disruptions that you may see. Now, number six, how do you support students' needs? Couple different things. Establish relationships, as I said here, ensuring students know that I want them there and utilizing positive reinforcement, right? So student needs, be it emotional needs, be it the educational academic needs, I try to begin my relationship with students knowing that letting them know what my role is in their life fundamentally, that I want them there, that I do want them there no matter what they're struggling with, no matter what their behavior is. I do want them here, right? It's not like I dislike you in any way, shape, or form. I do want you here. To the point where I got in trouble with this in one of my districts, right? On those little report cards, I would always say, is a pleasure to have in class even if the kid was failing everything, right? I'm like, no, I don't care that you're failing, right? I shouldn't say that. I still, I think you understand what I mean. I still want you here. I do want you in this room. I want you with us. I want you present. I want you around. You are a pleasure to have in my classroom. Let's just make sure that you're, doing the best that you can, et cetera, et cetera. So Positive reinforcement also, again, something that I personally always really remind myself. It's like, make sure you're doing that, make sure you're doing that. I think a lot of people, by the way, not just students in general, could use more of this, more encouragement, more positive reinforcement with their efforts in life. Okay. So I think that really helps begin to address student needs at a really kind of fundamental level. I also, of course, will utilize the parents, utilize the counselors, all that sort of stuff, because I am trained in trauma and instruction and also ACEs instruction. So I try to understand that there may be something pretty profound happening in a student's life, and I'm lucky to be enough. I'm lucky enough to be in a position where I've taught classes where I ask students or I give them the opportunity to share their struggles, in a private setting, in an assignment or whatever. And of course, every single time what happens is you have things are revealed that it's like, oh my God, like I had no concept that you were dealing with something like that. And I try to understand that between whether it's a student or an adult for that matter, that there might be something, there most likely is something very minimally under the surface that this person is dealing with that warrants your attention or warrants some adjustments of your approach to that person, right? Not to the point, of course, where I'm going to, provide you with a litany of excuses and a litany of, exceptions. No, no, no. But I try to be according in how I deal with that person, how I support that person, right? Okay. I do try to foster self-advocacy, right? So I make sure my students know that if you are struggling with something, if you do need help and support, I want you to come and practice coming to me and asking for help. It's a fantastic skill. It's a very important skill, so we don't suffer in silence and we don't, kind of get this arrogance sensation that we never really need to ask anyone for help. No, I want you to come talk to me, and it establishes our relationship and helps me support you even more while I'm trying to deal with, 20 other students in the room. And finally, of course, in a nitty-gritty way, I do practice differentiated instruction, right? I try to give somewhat accommodated and somewhat different assessments and different standards to students at times, while also, again, always encouraging that growth and kind of trying to lift them up and get them to the point where I want them to be. I do, of course, practice the accommodations that are on the IEP plan, my school accommodations, 504 plans, etc. Um, and I also focus on one-on-one corrections with the students, right? So one of the things that I do with my typical essay procedures and my essay policies is I will allow my students to have to write their essays, and then I grade them and maybe leave a comment here and there, give them the assessment grade. And if they don't like their grade, I encourage them to come sit with me to redo the essay. They get one redo per essay where I can sit with them one-on-one and we can go through in as much detail as they want, all the corrections that they need. So that I think really helps address a lot of their needs in terms of their academics and their skill building in my classroom. And of course, I also do provide quite a few resources that they may need, whether it is myself, the one-on-one time with myself. I'm available pretty late into the evening and early in the morning. I got my emails pretty much always on me if they need me. I give them a Google Classroom page where all of our classroom materials are, where this YouTube channel is, where audiobooks are, where our notes are, all this sort of stuff, where all of our anything I pass out in class is available. So all of these things I think really kind of culminate in having just a plethora of resources for these students to succeed. And that's essentially how I would, as it says here, support their needs. Number seven, how do I use data? Basically with all assessments, right? I usually, preferably if it's on like a Google Classroom page or a Google Classroom form, I try to track all of the average grades. I pay pretty close attention to where on rubrics people are struggling, if it's a skills assessment, which questions or what type of questions they're struggling with, if it's an actual summative assessment and quiz. And then I use that for my own kind of informed instruction where I say like, okay, this class is really struggling with, skill A, B, or whatever. And I'm like, okay, well then let's infuse that into our next lesson and really kind of drill that home and emphasize that. And I also use, particularly I did this with my Regents classes quite a bit. Those rubrics, I usually will have a way of tracking the student progress throughout the year. So what I tell my students to do is once they have completed one essay, they have the rubric, they got the feedback, maybe they did the corrections. You grab that essay, you grab that rubric, and then you save it for the next essay. And I usually will have them pull out their last rubric and be like, okay, remember, this is where you struggled last time. This is what we talked about in terms of how to fix it. Let's continue that moving forward. And I will then collect that rubric, right? And I try to kind of show a tracking, linear sort of way in which my students have improved, that there has been improvement pretty clearly. Okay. That's one of the major ways I use data in my room. Now, for number 8, how do you keep students engaged? Well, 3 notes on this. First and foremost, my own passion, my own love, my own engagement with the content and with them. I usually found in my early career that I could rely quite easily on this. And that was one of the major ways in which students continue to be engaged. As it says in this third point here, all of my observations that I've had, my formal observations by my administrators, have pointed out that this is one of the strong points, or if not the strongest point, of my classroom instruction, which is that the students are very much engaged, that I keep them engaged pretty clearly. Um, yeah, I have a personal interest in them, their ideas, their experiences, and try to connect everything with the universal experiences of life, right? So there is no such thing as a lesson of something that's completely abstract and not applicable to life. No, I try to connect it to life pretty clearly and pretty relevantly, and not in an entirely cheesy way, but in a pretty heavy way at times that really does engage them quite immediately. All right, so I think I've really kind of emphasized that in my own practice quite a bit, and I've seen um, a good amount of success in that field. So number 9, what are you most proud of on your resume? Well, the two the two things that pop up are, yeah, the performance in humanities and my argument unit. So with the humanities classes, like I've said, and you can actually go and see the videos of those that correspond to that course on this YouTube page. I've found that I'm really pleasantly surprised with how engaged students are with that material and how well they comprehend it, given the level of material. I mean, we're talking about, Greek literature, we're talking about Greek philosophy, we're talking about Roman literature, we're talking about some pretty heavy concepts in religion. We're talking about, the great works of literature and the ideas that they hold and they discuss. And these students, these ninth graders, kids that sometimes, like I said, will have a really large gap in their skills, wrestle with it and comprehend it pretty well. I mean, I can't forget this one time I was, and this happened consistently every year. I decided threw this in there just as an experiment. But I had my students in my first placement um, for the religion unit inside of the humanities class. I had them debating or discussing the existence of God and the problem of evil, and the questions and oppositions and supporting points of religion and all this kind of stuff. And they were watching some pretty almost college level videos for their research and throwing out some pretty intense vocabulary, talking about contingent beings and theodicy and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, these are ninth graders. These are ninth graders that you would have thought were going to fail out of ninth grade, and here they are contributing actually intense points and meaningful points on this very, very heavy and lofty discussion. They were able to do this consistently every year. And I'm shocked that, again, pleasantly shocked that I was able to at least help facilitate that to some degree. And I was proud of that. Additionally, with ninth grade, we have an argument unit where again, you can go see the video of that in our ninth grade section, but I basically give my students a choice of 9 I shouldn't say very, but 9 issues that are, or 10 rather, 10 issues, 10 topics, some of which are extremely controversial in today's day and age, or in general. And what I found is that every single year, are able to engage with these things in a mature way, in a sophisticated way, in a calm way. They don't, sound like someone screaming on Twitter or on the news or all this kind of stuff. They engage with each other and they try to think about it actually and come up with actually strong reasons and avoid logical fallacies and all this kind of stuff. To the point where it's like you go onto a college campus and that sort of stuff seems quite foreign, but they were able to do it. And maybe it's because they haven't been exposed to that, more toxic behavior yet. But I again was proud that I was at least trying to put them in that direction of like, no, 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 this is what functional, communal discussion and critical thinking and, mutual respect and love look like, even when we're discussing something very profound that we disagree on. Okay. So those are some things I was very proud of. And like I mentioned before, I'm very proud that in my ninth grade classes, my students were very successful and were able to move on with very strong skills to the point where we even saw it on the test scores, right? They had some of the highest test scores in their grade in their cohort, which were fantastic. So I was very proud of the fact that I was able to kind of really um, foster that growth. And I'm also proud that my students tend to be very enthused and very happy to engage in and hungry to engage in my two of my favorite electives, one of which was fantasy literature and one of which was psychology 101. So they really like to jump in, and I very frequently every year have students asking, Mr. G, is that elective being offered? Are you teaching that one next year? Is it going to be in there next year? I'm very proud that they enjoy that I actually have high school students wanting to take courses on these subjects that, are sometimes, viewed as rather nerdy and less interesting to the vast majority of the public. But I made them attractive and interesting to these students, which was very rewarding. Okay. So number 10, what would your admin say is your strength and weakness? Ooh, this one's fun. I'm gonna go down to the weakness first, right? My admins have usually pointed out to me that you're a little bit too self-critical, right? I tend to really like in those post-observation meetings, they'll say like, okay, write up what you think you should have done well. I might, you write like this paragraphs and paragraphs and pages of like, oh, I messed this up, I didn't do this, I should have been doing this. They'll come back and they're like, you're like too critical. Okay, you need to give yourself a break. You did well, and things were going pretty smoothly. So. I'm always ever at the end of every year, I'm always thinking I should have done this better. I should have done this better. I have a document here in my drive where for the past 4 years, I've just been going in and saying, make sure you don't do this, make sure you do this, make sure you do this more. If I notice myself doing something like, it's like there's a practice of something I was doing there. I'm like, hey, let's tweak that, do this instead, or remember to say this, not this. I'm very critical of myself, not to the point, thankfully where I am crippled and mired in that criticism, but to the point where, maybe it's a little bit unfair, right? Maybe it's a little bit inaccurate how much I criticize myself. So my admins would probably say that. For my strengths, they've said usually that like I said, connect and engage with students pretty aggressively or pretty strongly. Um, I have students tell me pretty consistently if they are going through something quite personal that's not even related to class. So again, I've demonstrated that I'm able to foster some good relationships with my students in a very nurturing and healthy way that can help them and can facilitate their growth inside and outside the classroom, which my admin has been very thankful for, and I'm thankful for them that they've given me the opportunities to do that, and they've also given me the compliments that I've written out here. Student engagement and management, we've talked about that already, but yeah, they've complimented me on how engaged my students are and how well managed my classroom can be. Okay. So number 11, what does student engagement look like in your class? What do we see when we walk into your classroom? Okay, so yeah, people in interviews will usually ask like, what do you think this should look like? You keep mentioning student engagement. What does that actually look like? What are we going to see when we walk into your room? So like I said, it looks like students having clear expectations within the classroom, which then produces comfort from them. And it produces a level of ease, a sense of safety where they can then move forward with the tasks that you are asking them to engage in. It allows them to engage with your material in a more meaningful and more intense and focused way, therefore, and even more rigorous material. Okay. And it produces overall in my classrooms what people usually call what the culture of learning, where people come into the room and they know this is a place to learn. This is a place to actually learn, not just, some basic SAT prep or this kind of stuff, but like learn things that are actively quite meaningful to our whole experience and whole project of life. And again, I'm happy and proud to say that I have had regular instances of students, particularly that humanities course, where I had students coming in and saying, "Hey, can I sit in on this class? Can I sit in on this class again? I got lunch right now, but can I sit it back in on this, and just kind of get ahead and learn what we're going to be doing." And I was shocked. I was shocked about that in my first years of teaching. I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "You're asking to come in here, not just to eat lunch, but also to kind of come in and engage with the lesson that you're going to get, earlier in the day or later in the day, or like what? Like you're actually actively coming in to um to learn," which was shocking, pleasantly shocking to me. Yeah. So that's one way, one way that could look. And the second point here is that they're on task, right? They're on task. They're demonstrating mature behavior, fun but mature behavior. They're seeking assistance and clarification, right? So they do ask me if they need help. They ask if if they're doing something right. That's very frequent. Students love that affirmation and love that kind of, comfort from you. I love to give that to them and say, "Yep, you're doing great. Keep going." It's great interaction to be able to have with them. So that's what it will pretty usually look like, especially on, those work days when we're all working on like an essay or something like that. I love to be just kind of mingling around the crowd and kind of like tweaking and helping kids, with the here, here, and here, and showing that they're all on task. They're all trying to maybe impress me at some point, but also kind of just do a good job, which is great. So that's what it would look like. Now, number 12, what is your education philosophy? Right. So we mentioned this before. Like I said, I'm going to make a whole video about this, but in summary, it is a my philosophy is that I have a pretty heavy moral responsibility as a teacher, right? I am being tasked with educating students about the literacy trinity and also about just general character education, universal character education. Now, again, for the specifics of that, definitely go watch that video. I have a statement that we're going to read through so you can know what I mean here and more specifically. Um, but I believe that I have a responsibility to teach the whole student, right? I don't want to be the educator that just teaches them, spelling skills and writing skills, right? There's more to life than that. There's more to English literature than that. I want to teach them all the things that they need to know. That are also, tangentially relevant to what we're discussing in class. And the students have overwhelmingly been thankful for that and been, kind and very charitable to me in their, those lovely notes they leave me at the end of the year saying, "Thank you for doing that. Thank you for teaching us about these things. Um, and thank you for caring for us," because I really want to make sure that that is the role that I am taking in their lives. So that's one part of my philosophy. Additionally, yes, love and value on each of the students. I believe, and my students know I'm pretty hardcore about stating this, that each of them, irrespective of their background, irrespective of anything about them at all, or what they do, no matter what, they all have inherent dignity and value. And so I try to make sure that my students understand that no matter what they come to my classroom with, whatever abilities they have, whatever background they have, whatever immutable characteristics they bring, they are all equally valued and equally deserving of love. That's a very essential point to my teaching philosophy and just to the general ethics that I teach in the classroom overall. Now, I also bring in terms of my philosophy, I also try to communicate that I think that the content we are learning, what it is that we are learning in terms of stories, the morals therein, the beauty and meaning of life, the goodness that we can learn to live out in those stories and the deep wisdom we can find in those stories is all deeply valuable and something we also should be loving and also engaging in quite a bit. And so, as you can kind of tell, my teaching philosophy is, like it says there in that last bullet point, a combination of both literacy, teaching you those three essential points of basic literacy, being comprehension, critical thinking, and articulation, but in combination with pretty clear character education, pretty universal character education, in order to kind of keep fostering a student's overall well-being and success in life. So for number 13, how do you include parents and guardians? Well, like I've mentioned before, best practice, when I'm totally on my game, I like to make sure that I'm contacting parents every month, or I'm sorry, every quarter. And so I can give them a little bit of update, just saying, hey, your son or daughter is still doing well, is, still, improving their skills here, may need to continue working on this sort of stuff. Thank you for your support, et cetera, et cetera. Just for positive reinforcement and also for opening up a basic line of communication for parents to, give me feedback of things that they would like, or things that they need help with, or things they need reassurance on, et cetera, or anything else of that nature. And that just creates a much, much better kind of flow of classroom management, flow of productivity, all this sort of stuff, and just generally better relationships overall. Okay, so that's one of the major ways I include parents. Now, for number 14. The question is, tell us about a time you failed or faced a challenge. Okay, so traditionally, the example that I gave was, I think it was in my third year of teaching. I was given a class where I swear the counselors were were putting me to the test, like they had it out for me that summer. They gave me so many students that it was one of those groups of students where it's like, as soon as someone saw the roster, they were like, oh my gosh, like all those guys in one class. I was like, yeah. It was a bunch of freshmen in my first school that I taught in full time. And, it was tough the first couple of weeks because I immediately kind of sensed, I was like, oh, I'm like, okay, we got a lot of defiant kind of personalities, a lot of kind of intense personalities, all this sort of stuff. But really quickly, I would say by like the end of the first like 5 week period, it was a classroom that I quickly got the flow of. We kind of matched each other's energies pretty well, and they learned their expectations. They learned the basic, proper rapport with me and what I was going to do, what I was going to put up with, and what I wasn't. And they adapted pretty much accordingly. And yet, still throughout the year, when people would learn, like, "Oh my gosh, you have that class," and they were like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "Yeah," I'm like, but they were fine. There was like 15 kids. Definitely a lot of serious issues in their background and serious problems in their behavior and in their academic, development. But by the end of that year, they were actually running as one of the best examples of classroom management that I had in my career at that time. They were self-managing each other, they were working with each other, and also correcting each other in an appropriate way, and in a very, high level, which I was deeply impressed with them by. They very clearly wanted to improve themselves, and they enjoyed becoming, more functional and more better and becoming better students overall, which was lovely to see. So I think that was the major first major challenge that I had. Now, um, I think one of the second point here is talking about the challenge of quote unquote harder freshman groups. That's the consistent point. And I had the same thing essentially happen at my current school of employment, where we had a freshman class. That it was almost like 25 plus students, and it was a lot of very, very active, kind of rambunctious athletes, and also students that needed a lot of support and were very kind of like, bombastic in their own way, and their own, very large personalities. And yet again, I heard like the same reactions of like, oh my gosh, that many of those characters in that class, like what is going on? And again, like simply was once again put to the task of really kind of tightening up those classroom management skills. And I think I did. I think I did pretty well. They all worked rather well for me. They all did rather well academically in the class, and they, went on to become very strong students. I just had them in the previous few years. Some of them stuck around, some of them went to different schools. But it was a success overall. So yeah, those are some pretty clear challenges that I have faced, and I think I've overcome relatively well, and I'm still trying to, tweak how I could do it even better in the future. So for number 15, what has been the greatest success in your career? That's one of those like impossible questions, right? Like because there's some days where I'm like, oh, it's A, B, it's C, it's this one, this one, this one. There's some moments when I think of some of the students, like individual students who've voiced how much of an impact I've made or how much I have helped them. When I just think like I'm like that's my biggest success, if I if I do nothing else in life like that, that's pretty amazing. But for the brevity's sake of the interview, I usually give, I've narrowed it down to these three things. So A, I I point out just the general collection of those types of students or those situations with students when they come to me seeking help with something very clearly not, you know, uh, English literature based, when they want to talk about something as serious as suicidality in points, at some points, something as serious as, their relationships with their family. And the fact that they felt comfortable enough to do that with me, or they saw me, or any teacher for that matter, as a source of help for them is, I think, a serious sign that, we're all doing something right, or we're all on the right track generally. So that was a major success, and they were okay afterwards, which I'm happy to report. That all I have yet to experience a major tragedy with students in this regard, and a lot of the kids, will struggle in other ways too, and some of the vast majority of them, don't come and share their issues with you. But seeing them overcome those challenges, I think, has been one of the greatest successes that I've seen in my career. Aside from that, at a more academic, professional level, for B, I put the general popularity of the courses that I teach. I was always afraid, like, oh, I'm going to be less and less popular. I'm going to get more and more jaded and more kind of tired as the years go on, and that, initial kind of young teacher popularity will fade away. I haven't found that as much. I find that my students are frequently asking, especially with psych, like, are you teaching psych? Are you teaching fantasy literature? I want to take this class, and I want to take that class, and I want to go into this class and check it out. And they have positive reviews leaving the class. I see that as a success, that, what we're doing here is going well. And then of course, C, I see it, as I mentioned before, as a major success that in a class like the humanities, I'm setting a very rigorous and decidedly high bar of expectations on my students, and they're meeting them. They're meeting them quite definitively, and they're actually meeting them quite readily. They're actually trying to meet them. So the fact that a course like the humanities was a success, the fact that it's also popular and other courses I've taught are popular, and the fact that students are, willing at times to share these incredibly personal and difficult struggles with me. I'd say those are 3 points that sum up the general success of my career thus far. Now, for number 17, how do you promote fairness and inclusion in your classroom? Fantastic question. And if you're paying attention, right, it kind of links back immediately to my philosophy, my general philosophy as a person, and also especially as a teacher, which essentially undergirds and answers the question from the get-go that I do believe all students are equal in their value, no matter what, irrespective of everything, every other factor. They're all equal and valuable human beings deserving of love and respect. So that right off the bat is something I articulate to them, and I try to live out with them. in practice constantly, always giving them as much assistance as they will need if they come and ask for it, especially. And finally, understanding the second point here is understanding that they do have different needs and experiences that they bring to the classroom from every different dimension of their life, be it their socioeconomic background, be it their race, be it their gender, be it their sexuality, be it their religion, be it their general culture, be it their athletic background, be it their creative backgrounds, be it their ideas that they have, be it the struggles that they've had within their family, the struggles they've had with their friends, any sort of issues that they've had that they bring to the table are just infinitely diverse. And I try to include all of them as much as possible and take them into my understanding of who they are and how to help them to the best of my abilities. Okay. So yeah, that's how I generally aim to be fair and inclusive in my classroom. And yeah, the last point here, which I think gets overlooked sometimes, is something I again referenced earlier with that phrase, that somewhat famous phrase, the soft bigotry of low expectations. I always do expect high performance from my students, irrespective of the backgrounds. I will not exclude someone from the challenge of tackling what it is that we are tackling. Yes, of course, I make accommodations when it is necessary and asked for. However, the ideas at the very minimum are still going to be placed in front of you, and you will have to struggle with comprehending them, understanding them, and then trying to articulate them. So no one is exempt from that. I always will kind of give them high expectations and give them the opportunity to lift a lot of heavy weight, as I usually say to them, no matter what, no matter what. Okay. So 18. How have you incorporated technology in your teaching? Yeah. Um, in a lot of different ways. From the beginning, I'm blessed, I'm a millennial, so I'm blessed with being a little bit more proficient or feeling as if I'm more proficient with technology, right? I think I came in to a lot of schools right when like systems like School Tool and Google Classroom were kind of becoming popular. So I became proficient with those very quickly. So I have all of my materials on Google Classroom. I'm creating a YouTube channel, as you see before you. And I also like to utilize visual media quite frequently and also auditory media quite frequently in my classes, particularly in the form of audiobooks. I love audiobooks. I love audio performances because even I and people, even the people I love dearly, get tired of my voice after a while, particularly if it's in a 45-minute class period. So let's listen to someone else read Shakespeare, probably in much better, acting inflections than I could probably do. And additionally, I love media too. I love to throw in a video here, a video there, just to help with the visuals or to connect with some media that they might be more familiar with. So yeah, technology in the form of audiobooks, data collection, classroom websites, video recordings of our lessons, all that sort of stuff. I'm very, very, very open to all the different forms of media that could support our education, while also, strengthening and keeping some of the bare essentials intact, like the ability to write, the ability to kind of just read like a normal text in front of you. I am not a fan of having students in front of screens for too often. I will say that, like in my classroom, we don't usually use the Chromebooks like virtually at all, unless there's a day or two for research here or there. When we're in the classroom together, I want the attention to be on each other, to be on some kind of physical work in front of them, and with me and whatever I'm trying to engage them with. Usually, I leave the Chromebook and technology use in that sense for outside the classroom. Okay. Now, for 19, what are your current reading? What are you currently reading professionally or personally? Yeah. So this is an ideal answer, right? Because like right now, what am I reading? I'm reading I think an Avatar: The Last Airbender book. But ideally, if everything's running nice and relatively smoothly in life, I try to shoot for 3 books at a time. Usually like one in the form of an audiobook and then like two in the form of actual text. So my general routine is, as it says here, one for just general content and skill growth. So, like for example, I'm rereading this summer Jonathan Haidt's The Anxious Generation. So something related to students or child's mental health or education or something like this. So I can actually kind of absorb that and think about that and kind of integrate it into my practice somehow, some way. And then I would also like to to read one book for content. So, I think the last book that I read for content was, oh, let's see. I reread Macbeth. I was being a little bit lazy with myself, and I was like, you know what? I want to reread Macbeth and try to look at it a little more closely. But I think next on the list is King Lear. I want to look into King Lear a little bit more. But essentially, I grab some form of literature, something to do with either, a nice form of English literature, something that's historical, something that's psychological. It's just something in the content field that I would want to learn more about. And then I, of course, have to have something for fun. I need to have a good bedtime story, which usually, let's be honest, ends up being Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or, a Narnia book or something like this, or just something that's kind of fantastical and, like a comfort bedtime story for me, because nothing puts me out like a good story. It just conks me right out. So that's my ideal, paradise situation of what I would be reading. Number 20, how do you respond to feedback from students, parents, or administrators? So, again, ideally, I try to act out a very Socratic principle of taking criticism or taking any sort of poke or even an insult, right, as a potential actual growth point, like or something to foster growth. And to essentially, as what I tell my students to do is like take the hit, right? It's like take the hit. It's like, oh, okay, someone says you're doing this too much. Someone says you could do this more. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Could I actually do that more? I think I've tried to demonstrate that I'm not that rigid. I'm not too rigid with myself or with my own performance. I try to kind of be adapting and growing, albeit within some, good frameworks and solid structures. However, I like that feedback. I think from the very beginning of my education, road, feedback and, constructive criticism was a constant. Um, Presence for me, and I try to use it constantly. So if it comes from a student, if it comes from a parent, comes from an administrator, that's always welcome. And I usually prompt that too. I usually ask, like, what could I improve on? What would you like to see me do better? Anything I could improve on? And like, for example, next year I want to make my, essay policies and essay guidelines a little bit more clear. Something like that. I'm like, oh, I got that in my head. I got that list that I mentioned to you earlier of things that I want to not forget about, as I move on through my teaching practice. So it's like, keep doing this, don't do this, avoid this, let's do this a little bit more. That's usually how I respond to criticism and feedback. And of course, yeah, as I said here, I aim for immediate implementation and change, right? I don't usually ruminate on things very long, especially if it's like a teaching practice sort of thing. It's like, hey, you need to be a little more clear about this. You need to make sure you do this a little more. It's like, okay, let's try that next period, let's try it immediately. That's how my student teaching basically went down. It was like 3 or 4 freshman classes in a row, and I had a lovely I think it was a co-teacher at the time who basically just told me to, like, all right, she's gonna sit back in the corner, she's just gonna let me go. I was like, okay. So I went and I was like, all right, how did that go? She's like, it was pretty good. You need to tweak this. And I'm like, you got it. Next class, tweaked it. How did that go? A little bit better, about 50% there, tweak it again. So we just did that basically every day. So it was a fantastic coaching and development experience for me because it just got me used to that and that mode of like, okay, keep tweaking this, do this a little bit better, and to not be too sensitive, about that sort of criticism. Okay. So for number 21, where do you want to grow professionally? Right. So again, perfect scenario if I could, have best professional development or time off to research or to kind of improve my skills a little bit, what would it be? I'm really interested in the use of AI right now. I'm interested to see how it can be used. What are the benefits, drawbacks of it, obviously. I know like everyone's terrified that students are just going to kind of, start plugging in their essay prompts and having it, spit out something like this. Which, of course, that it brings up the question: what is the use of being able to write an essay? What is the use of being able to use essays as the form in which students can articulate their work? Is there an argument to be made that maybe we should start implementing more spoken articulation and less writing? Who knows? I'm open to that. I'm open to learning about that. I want also to learn, when is it appropriate to introduce AI as, for example, an organizational tool or a brainstorming tool. Presently, right now, my knee-jerk reaction to that is to say something like, oh, I want to avoid it until maybe like senior year. So I make my freshmen, for example, really kind of sit and flex their intellectual muscles and strain them and have to kind of grow them before they rely on a machine database to kind of prompt or create the prompts and questions and ideas and arguments that they should be able to create themselves or try to create themselves or research for themselves at the very least. So that's one. The other one is, of course, content knowledge. I want to always keep learning about content knowledge. Like I have a list on my phone right now that I'm actually using AI essentially to help me create a curriculum for myself to just keep learning. So I think it's like my routine right now is like every Saturday morning, as I'm running around doing chores, I'll usually like plug in a topic or a book or something of that nature within the content that I'm teaching that year. Like, hey, teach me more about this stuff. Teach me more about this stuff, and I'll ask some questions. Create a little course outline for myself to keep growing that. So that's something I would love to do is just be able to sit down and actually be like, hey, I want more, instruction on how, essays should be written or how, this sort of literature can be appealing to kids or this, things like this. Okay. And then finally, how to create kind of like what I was just hinting at, how to create more meaningful and character-driven assessments. And I started to move towards this in the past few years where I no longer ask my students, again, it's always going to depend on the district and what some of the goals are of what we're trying to do, if there's like a Regents exam or an AP exam, etc. But I have begun to move away from simply asking my students to, oh, let's say, write a literary analysis for their major cumulative writing demonstration. And I've moved more towards asking them to explain to me the thematic and moral relevance of a particular work that we're reading. Like, what is this actually teaching you about life and about how you should conduct your life, or maybe how you shouldn't conduct your life? That's something that I've moved more towards. So just new strategies of how to implement character education or meaningful assessments for students would be really interesting. So yeah. And then number 22, what frustrates you the most in teaching? That's an interesting one. Now, I had to answer at a semi-deep level to criticize, I would say, the sort of culture around education that we've established in our education system. And I know the education system is like a punching bag that everyone likes to hit, but I try to be a little bit more precise when I do critique it, if at all. And one of the major ways that I critique it are one of them is actually not on here. There's about two ways. I would love for us to try to make a concerted effort to stop equating a person's value, like actual moral personal value, with their grades or their intellect. I don't think that that is a moral thing to do, as my teaching philosophy just told me. That's about as, what would you say? That's about as fiery and as controversial I get as an educator. I don't like the sometimes implicit pressure we put on students or kind of passive aggressive way in which we make a student who, for example, might be, a lower B student, a C student, maybe even a D student, feel as though that they are less than because of their grades, because of their intellect. I don't think that they are. I don't think that they should feel as though they are. I think that they should learn how to perhaps see their value in other ways. I think that there are other things that make them valuable. I think there are other things, other places where they can find value and meaning. And I don't think that your intellect determines your value. I don't think so at all. And I wish that we would try to articulate that to students a little bit more. I think that would also help them generally move away from the intense amount of anxiety and fear that they feel when they are not performing well academically. They feel as though it's a reflection on their own character. It's a source of shame. And I also think that it's a source of intense fear for what their future is going to be like. I try to tell my students very frequently that, you can very much be an average or even below average student and still have a deeply successful, meaningful, fulfilling life. Okay. It is not a predictor of your long-term success in any dimension. Okay. It's just not. That being said, we want to foster, good diligence. We want to foster, good hardworking skills, all that kind of stuff. But, we need to strike that balance. We need to find that balance. And I think that we can do a better job at that. The other thing I didn't have written on here, and it usually just flashes into my head, is of course I wish we had more. I wish students had more kind of free play. I wish that I'm a big advocate, and I definitely have been convinced of the need for more free play, be it in the form of like what's it called, athletics, or be it in the form of just kind of free time to socialize with each other. I don't think students, post 2012 get enough of that. I think that that's a really, really great opportunity, especially in the younger years, for elementary and middle school. I think that's a great time for people to just get around and, socialize with each other. I would love to see it in high school too, if possible. So, big advocate for getting your kids to go and play outside or kind of play with each other and, rough and tumble play, all the kind of fun stuff that, helps them develop into confident, competent, and not so fragile and but brave young men and women. I think that's really, really good for them. So yeah, that's what frustrates me generally. 23. If you could teach anything, what would it be? Oh, it's always fantasy, right? If I could teach Lord of the Rings every day, I would do that. I love Lord of the Rings. I love fantasy. I love Harry Potter. I love mythology. If you can give me the opportunity to teach that stuff, I would love it. Specifically, though, within the kind of a smaller category, I love teaching the hero's journey. Please go see the video on archetypes in the hero's journey. I think you can tell just from my intenseness in that particular lesson how much I love it. I think it's so applicable. I think it's so beautiful and so wonderful for students to learn, and it's a lot of fun to teach too. And of course, Psych 101 as well. It's usually it's quite draining on me. I think it's the one subject that actually I feel a little bit draining because I put a lot of pressure on myself to be at my best when I teach Psych, because it is a very sensitive issue, and it is an issue with a lot of impact. So I try to be, quite quite on my game when I'm teaching Psych. But it's also something I really do enjoy teaching because of how much students can engage immediately with it and how much they can take out. I think it's really, really a wonderful thing for them to be doing. So yeah, that's what I would teach if I had, my free reign of my curriculum, right? Last two. Who has inspired you as a teacher? Well, in the nonfiction world, so in real life, it has to be my former teachers, right? I remember. If she's watching this, that'd be fantastic. Mrs. McKee was my sixth grade, right? Sixth grade, his history teacher, and I remember that she was also my tutor when I was I think I was 3 grades behind in my reading and my writing. And she actually was a tutor that my mother hired to come into my house and, help me, read. She used the wonderful method of having me read to her dogs and use, kind of therapy dog techniques and that. It was fantastic. She was a wonderful, wonderful woman. She is a wonderful woman. And she inspired me to kind of want to keep working at this sort of stuff because I enjoyed succeeding in her eyes. And I had the exact same relationship with I think it was my eighth grade English teacher, Mrs. Coles, in high school. She did the same thing to me. She was just a really fun person to kind of relate with. I very much kind of could tell that she liked me. She liked me in my little weird, drawings that I would always make in her class or just in class in general. And I think she was the first teacher that I really enjoyed succeeding with, and that kind of it gave me the taste of like, ooh, I like this. I like doing well. I like doing my homework and being kind of successful in this dimension of life. And she just kept encouraging that, which is so nice of her. And of course, I had to mention Mr. Horst, my ninth grade algebra teacher, which I absolutely did atrociously on in algebra. I think I got like a 70 something, and my average was the lowest average in high school at all. But he was a fantastic teacher. He is a fantastic teacher, and I enjoyed his classes. I enjoyed him to no end. He's a fantastic guy. He was also my chess coach. My chess teacher is the one who taught the chess elective with, and he was a very real teacher. He is a very real teacher, and he kind of taught me, or he gave me a cool basis of what a teacher could be like and what a teacher could do. So alongside those three, just any number of coworkers that I've seen, these, particularly like some of these teachers who are like 40 years senior teachers that are still just rocking it and still, loving their lives and just, just completely managing their classroom like it's like nothing, like it's no issue. And they just have like, the greatest rapport with their students. I love seeing that. That's so cool. So those guys are always a huge inspiration for me. Now, of course, I put in here my fictional inspirations because, being someone who loves stories, I do in fact draw inspiration from other characters. Basically, any mentor character in the stories that I've already mentioned. So that, of course, means, characters like Dumbledore, Gandalf, Yoda, Qui-Gon, all these other kind of, these classic mentor figures that we see in fantasy. I love the goodness that those characters emulate, embody, and inspire in the people around them. And so, I try to like embody that to some degree. Yes, I'm just saying out loud what everyone knows that they're doing in the movie theater when they're like, oh, they like how Superman behaves. Or they like how this character behaves. It's like, yeah, I do that too. And those are some of the characters that I try to be like. I'm a little bit overt about it when I put, Dumbledore paraphernalia all over my classroom. But those are my general inspirations um, as to what sort of teacher I want to be. Now, for the final question, people usually end in an interview. If they don't, then I try to at least bring it up. What would be the best, or what would you be? How would you be part of? I can read, I promise. How would you be part of your school's culture? First and foremost, I mentioned clubs. Like I love to run clubs, especially the chess club. I do run the debate club sometimes. I try to tweak it though. I don't usually like debating for debating's sake as a sport. I like to make it more of a discussion club and kind of foster more mutual discussion, not like we were trying to win arguments. I try to actually just make it something that's more exploratory. So yeah, I will do that sometimes. And recently we've started to discover or started to understand that we might actually need to make a sword club because yes, I do have foam swords in my classroom and students always want to duel with them. So I'm like, maybe I'll just make this a class and we'll bring, fencing and HEMA and Kendo into public schools or private schools rather. That'd be fantastic. Student life as well. I like to be engaged, whether it's as a dean for a particular house that we're in the competitions in the private school kind of system, or if it's in student government, running the homecoming, committee and all this kind of stuff. I like to be involved in that to some degree. It's fun. The students enjoy it. It's fun to kind of, mess around with them in, the float building and all this kind of stuff outside the class. It is a bit of fun because it also kind of builds that rapport and builds that community, which is a huge, huge benefit for basically everything that I'm trying to do as a teacher. And also just being a very supportive coworker. I will constantly be asking, do you need me to cover your class? Do you need more like kids to come into my room if you need to like, run out or whatever? You need me to watch your classroom? You need me to help with this, or this, whatever you need. Happy to help. If someone's out sick, I'm usually like buzzing their email, like, hey, do you need anything? You need me to do this, that? I try to be very supportive because I know the day is very, very hectic sometimes and can be very high pace and very stressful to some people more than others. So I try to be supportive in that sense. So yeah. Well, that, ladies and gents, is those are the 25 questions that I see most commonly in interviews. And I hope that that gives you some general insight as to who I am and who I try to be as a teacher and as a professional employee. So thanks very much for listening. In the next video that we're going to have, I'm going to actually share with you directly my teaching philosophy. I'm going to walk you through that. I'm going to explain in a little bit more detail what my beliefs are and what my underlining goals are as a teacher and why. Okay. So thank you very much. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I will see you very soon. In the meantime, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye.